Oh my God, what am I doing? Hi, everybody. Welcome to Just Thinking Out Loud. I'm doing something a little bit different today. Today, I'm going to be talking to my friend, Dan, and we're just going to be having a discussion on the topic of socialism mostly, even though it might veer into something different. We were just having a conversation one day, and I believe that I was telling him the benefits of capitalism, and we were talking about inequality. And then he made a comment saying that I seem to have a bias against communism. And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. And then he was going to share with me some history on the origins of socialism and why it was important. And we were having that discussion. We talked a bit about unions. I remember we ended the discussion somewhere there. And he has a thesis, which he's going to talk to me about why socialism hasn't really been allowed to take off. And he's such a fascinating person, and I always learn so much when he's telling me about history that I thought that I wanted to take this on my channel and share it with you guys. So hi, Dan.
Hi, Desi-Rae.
Hey. um do you remember what we were talking about, actually? Like do you need to, or do you just want to jump in from?
Yeah, I remember we were talking about the origins of some of the biases against radical left ideologies like socialism, communism. And I was talking about the how from the very beginning, those ideologies were under attack by the dominant forces, which at the time, especially in Europe, were the landed aristocracy and the rising bourgeoisie, the middle class, the class that came up under capitalism, the ones who gained their riches through capitalism and not through uh, inherited titles.
Can you give me some dates here? And also, could we sort of give a bit of a definition, like when we say capitalism versus communism, just so that people know, everybody's clear on what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. I am referring to around the 1800s. That's really when a lot of these forces started to arise. And it's all coming from the Enlightenment. So, you have these revolutions, especially in Europe after the French Revolution. 1848 specifically, there were just revolutions all over Europe as a direct result from the kind of democratizing ideas that Napoleon kind of forced upon a lot of places in Europe. Not to say Napoleon was, I'm not a huge fan of Napoleon. I think.
What do you mean? Sorry to interrupt. What did you mean by democratizing ideals? And also, you said forces. I wasn't sure. Like, what? Can you be
Well, so
specific?
I mean, yeah, Napoleon did. Um, he was supposed to be this hero of the French Revolution. And the French Revolution was this very literal and also profoundly metaphorical break from those old European traditions of divine right of kings and landed aristocracy and the supremacy of the Catholic Church and all of these ideas. The French Revolution very cleanly broke with. And then, Napoleon comes along as this hero of the revolution, turns himself into an emperor, and it's a whole big mess. But over the course of his reign, he forcefully, through his armies, waged war against the powers in Europe who were landed aristocracy, the kings and nobles who had been running the continent for so long. And
So he was a man of the people? Like, I'm confused about which side he's on. Like, was he for, I guess, when you said he democratized, like you're saying that he was the beginning, that was the beginnings of socialism. It was countering like land ownership and transferred inherited wealth. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it gets complicated because for a number of reasons. I don't want to spend too much time on Napoleon, but yeah, Napoleon was supposed to be, the way that he sold himself and the way that his supporters thought of him was the guardian of the revolution, the guardian of this radical idea that that your inherited titles should not determine your value in life, that it should be based on something else, whether that's the Enlightenment ideas of, all human life is inherently valuable, or some other kind of meritocracy, like at least the underlying ideal of capitalism is meritocracy, right? That
yes.
If you work hard, then you get what you deserve.
Right. So that was the first revolution, like capitalism. Is that what you're saying? Because I thought you were saying that that's where the origins of socialism came in, but you're saying that no, it was capitalism, and then the people who were the first revolutionaries didn't like the people who came along next with ideas of communism. Is that what you're saying?
It was both. So both the ideas of capitalism and the ideas of socialism come from the Enlightenment. And Marx...
we haven't defined them yet. I'm sorry.
Yes, okay. So I suppose the basic way of defining the two, under capitalism, they're economic systems, and under capitalism, everything is commodified, everything must be owned, and everything has a money value. What this means is that we can abstract needs, abstract what people need to survive. A good friend of mine just recently sent me a game, a very short online game, and it's called Post-Capitalism, and it's this wonderful. I'll send you the link later, and you can probably like post it on your additional info or whatever. But there's this wonderful little game where it's just a point and click, and it shows you a little capitalist city, and a lot of the inherent issues of capitalism, such as commodifying natural resources, or unemployment as a necessity of capitalism, or general waste, et cetera, et cetera.
I want to write these down. I didn't. I'll let you finish. I didn't think of those things. Like, what do you mean by general waste?
Oh, under capitalism, we produce far more than we need, and then a lot of it is wasted. It's pretty obvious in this country how much waste
there's a lot of excess.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Under socialism, and there are so many strains and varieties of socialism. Communism is a type of socialism, but so is, I don't know, communism is obviously very different from something like social democrats, who are more liberal in the sense that they're less hardliners.
Yes, the Social Democrats, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Well,
So, yeah.
when I think about communism, I think about state ownership of everything and central planning. When I think about socialism, that's more, there's capitalism, but then there's some interference. Like, that's what I think. And in how it's not a total free market, but the government can say what money can be spent where, but only to a certain degree, or how much profit someone can take. It's just they're interfering basically in property rights, because they're saying you can't do what you want, but we're going to try and structure society allowing you to produce, like own and produce, but not really, because we're going to shift you getting back, so in order to shape society. And there are different degrees to that.
Yeah, I think that's accurate to what most people, including supporters of socialism, think of when they think of socialism.
Okay.
That's, I think, the most popular version, and probably the most flexible version right now in American politics. Yeah, I mean, I'm personally very left on the political spectrum, but I'm a bit agnostic, so to speak, as far as ideologies go. I call myself an anarchist, mostly because I don't think that I or anyone else should prescribe a proper way to live or organize society. But I do have very strong ideas about how society should not be organized. And I think that anarchism is not a political philosophy. It's a moral philosophy. It's this idea that kind of is very compatible with socialism and even communism. This idea of radical egalitarianism, radical non-hierarchy.
But I feel like you just said, I can't remember your exact words, but I think you just said that you didn't, when you were describing yourself as an anarchist, that meant letting people, I guess, do what they want. I know that's not what you said.
Yeah,
but
so
it sounds contradictory to me, like saying that you're an anarchist, but saying that lends itself to socialism and communism. However, I also understand that there are different kinds of anarchists. Like there are people who are anarcho-capitalists, and then there are people who are like what you're describing.
Yes.
And I don't understand because they're using the exact same word.
So with anarcho-capitalists, I don't know what your audience is like, but and you may want to cut this. I don't know, but they're.
You can insult people, like don't worry about it. They'll just argue in the comments, but that's fine.
So yeah, the rest of the anarchists definitely think of anarcho-capitalists as self-contradictory, and I don't know. I think that it's completely insane. And
explain.
It's just
please explain.
So anarcho-capitalists, as far as I understand, is kind of an extreme libertarian. That's essentially the sense I get, right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yes.
The problem with libertarianism, and look, libertarianism and anarchism have a lot in common, and it's not an accident. They have the same parents. They have the same lineage. It's just that with libertarianism, they focus more on property rights, more on the so a lot on property rights and other individual freedoms.
Whereas
the majority of other anarchists focus more on social issues and class issues. And so from my perspective, it's a bigger picture. They're looking at a bigger picture of bigger social trends that affect large groups of people in unfair ways. And they're looking more at anarchists generally care a lot about the underclass. That's where they're most at home.
Yeah, but I'm still confused because I'm thinking about the term anarchy, because when you say anarchy, I'm thinking you allow freedom, but in trying to fix social issues, you take that away. Like, that's what I think. Like, that's
Yeah,
what,
so
but that, to me, that's self-contradictory, even though you're saying that for the libertarian, like the anarcho-capitalist, the extreme libertarianism, that seems self-contradictory. But like, I'm seeing what you're saying in terms of anarchy tying itself with communism or socialism. And I know that these thoughts exist, and I'm sure there's logic to it, but that seems self-contradictory to me. So could you like explain that?
yeah, so first of all, and this is something that I like to point out, the word anarchy or anarchism, it literally means without rulers or no masters.
Right.
So it's focusing specifically on these relations of hierarchy of all different kinds. Whereas I think anarcho-capitalists put the priority on economic liberties, economic freedom. The rest of anarchists put their emphasis on these relationships. So, for example, I don't know, they're into unions because unions provide collective bargaining power for employees against their employers, against their bosses. And that provides for a more egalitarian workplace. Even better would be something like a co-op or a worker-owned factory or whatever, a business.
But can I interrupt you here? Because like I think this is where I broke our conversation. Because like unions, I was saying that unions make sense in terms of banding together to, I guess, drive up the price of your labor so that you're not just all competing with each other, but you're competing as a unit. However, in terms of unions forcing other people to join them, I was an EMT for a bit and in the city, and I had to like automatically sign up to be in their union and like pay dues, which I had no interest whatsoever in doing. So that is a form of taking away freedoms. So unions is voluntary, but
you're not getting nothing for your dues.
Yeah, but I don't want it. Like, I didn't make that choice.
Sure, but I mean, this kind of feels like and I know this is very, very different. But it feels kind of like the herd immunity vaccination argument that...
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? You know where I'm going with this? That, like...
Let's go there.
Yeah, you may not... You may never actually need this vaccine, but the more people who have it, the safer we all are.
Yeah, but that's limiting freedoms, and like that is a form of hierarchy to me, because they're like these people who I can't say no to because they're backed by the law or the state. So,
well, in theory,
like unions, like I get it if it's totally voluntary, like people just say, like this is our prevailing wage, and I'm sure you have to organize it. But when someone doesn't have the choice to back out, I don't know that does not seem like freedom or...
Well, in theory, unions are democratic, right? Like,
but I'm trying to say that they're not, though. Like, if they're enforced, like I get in theory, yes, but...
Well, okay, so like in Australia, you have to vote. It's illegal not to vote, and you have to pay a fine if you don't. But so like you're a part of this system whether you like it or not, and you pay taxes and you pay into the system whether you like it or not.
Right.
But it's still democratic.
I don't see that as democratic if you have no choice.
It's
Like that.
democratic in the sense that you have it's one person, one vote, and your leaders are people who have been elected, not in the case of a job, in a business, people who have been promoted over you, or people who have, for whatever reason, have some kind of authority over you.
But you're talking
Whether that's
about hierarchy, but like that in itself, like this, the being forced to vote and having to pay a fine, that's a hierarchy that a lot that.
but that's a higher. Okay, so if we're talking, so we always have to kind of talk on a sliding scale,
Okay.
because that's just the world that we live in, right? If we're talking about hierarchy in the sense of people telling you what you can and can't do, I don't know. I think that it's demonstrably more democratic to be a part of a union where you have a vote, than to be a part of a company where you don't have a vote. Right? I mean, like, you know what I mean? Just
Right,
from that power stance alone.
okay. But I can't get over that you don't have the choice whether or not you want to be in the union. Like that is like the ultimate like hand tying to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. Different businesses have, and different industries have different rules on that. So I can't really speak to that. What I can speak to is just the basic idea that, and this is just a basic idea of capitalism, that you have bosses, and that the bosses, it's what Marx and other theorists have called extracting surplus value, right? Like the essential conflict between employees and employers, or subordinates and bosses, is that the subordinates want their labor to be valued more, and they want to get paid for that, while the bosses want to get the most labor out of the subordinates by paying them the least so that they make the most profit.
Well, I feel like I have to interrupt you here because first of all, this is where we were talking. So you're describing the employees as subordinates, but I don't get that because they're entering into this contract
You can enter
voluntarily.
into a contract,
But also, you're making it sound as if either the boss or the employee decides what value the employee has, but it's dependent on what everybody else is doing. It's not just like the boss is like, I don't want to pay you more. It's, I have so much labor available. So yes, you're not, right. It's like competition.
You're talking about, so the supply and demand, right? Your value, right. Your labor is, the value of your labor is dependent on how the market values your labor. Sure, okay, fine, whatever. Mm-hmm. The essential, what I'm talking about is surplus value, is what employees are not paid for, is they're not given a proportionate amount of whatever value they've created by their work. They don't.
You mean in dollars? Is that what you're saying?
Dollars, yeah.
But so that's exactly what we were just talking about in terms of the market value.
But okay, so there's this really interesting experiment. I think it was called the Cincinnati Times Store, in the 1840s, I want to say. And it was this early American anarchist who had a bunch of money. I don't remember the story exactly, but he had a bunch of money, and he decided to open this store.
Anarchist meaning on the left or on the right? Like as we were just talking.
What's up?
Anarchist meaning on the left or on the right?
Left.
Okay.
He opened the store in which shoppers would pay for the products with credit that they earned by working at the store. And the way that it worked was nobody was making a profit. Like, the guy who opened the store wasn't making a profit. And so everything in the store was super crazy cheap because you were paying
but that's
literally
because
only for the labor that it took to grow the thing and get it there.
Yeah, but that means that the guy who set the store up, he's making that decision to not be paid for his work. That is him coming up with the idea and starting everything. But that doesn't mean that anybody else who does that shouldn't be paid for their work. Like, that sounds like a nice experiment.
So then there's the example of Dr. Bronner's, the soap company.
Yeah, I know them. I've used their soap.
Yeah, it's great soap. They, I guess the CEO, or I don't remember exactly the details, but because I'm not sure if it's like still owned by the original family or what, but the people who run the company have a salary cap, like a pretty significant low salary cap.
But that's their decision.
Specifically to funnel that money into better works.
Like charity?
Yeah. So, okay, so this question of freedom and limiting freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're kind of circling around this.
I do too.
There was a very good, I think it was like that Radiolab podcast spinoff, More Perfect, about Supreme Court cases. I think it was that podcast where they talked about this essential conflict between freedom and equality.
Mm-hmm.
And it came up specifically with the Citizens United case, right? This idea that corporations could spend unlimited amounts of money to fund political campaigns, and how this is the way that it was argued. The supporters argued that this is an expression of freedom, and to limit the amount of contributions a corporation can make is limiting their freedom.
A corporation. A corporation isn't a person. I know in law it is, but I think that's garbage. But continue.
Right. So
I think the argument will still hold up either way. Like what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that this is an extreme argument. This also happens to be an extreme argument that played out and is now law, and it is insane, in my opinion. But it was argued as this principle of freedom, as this principle of freedom and limiting freedom. The arguments against it, and there are many, but one of the most compelling ones for me is this kind of like deeper philosophical one. By allowing this type of freedom, you have drowned out the voices of so many more. That freedom is not equal if under capitalism, because those who have more wealth have more freedom.
But that makes sense. But everybody has the freedom to generate wealth. Or you would say that's not true?
I don't buy that. I mean, in theory, sure, but that sounds like the setup of social Darwinism.
Right. This is exactly what you told me. You said that I sounded like a social Darwinist. because I was saying that everybody has the right to earn what they're earning because they're producing value, and not everybody does it the same way. But I do think that for whatever system people have, like if there's no altruism, it won't really work out. So even though I'm very not really on the left at all, but more in terms of economics on the right, I do think that I wouldn't want to live in a world where there's great inequality. And I also think this is true for most people. To me, I just don't want to be forced to do things. I'm sure you already know this. But you're saying that the system itself, that people, like the laws that people put in place, should generate freedom by making it easier for persons to have the same access to things regardless of how much they're able to produce. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me.
Okay.
I would just like to point out that that a lot of people, I think, a lot of people who are concerned about things like immigration or the way that our society is changing, et cetera, et cetera. I think it comes down to a fear of that there isn't enough in this world for all of us to live comfortably. And the fact is that there is absolutely, demonstrably enough resources as of now for all of us to live comfortably. It's just that we have by far the most lopsided, insanely skewed wealth distribution in the world right now. At no time in human history has more wealth, more percentage of the total wealth been in such few hands. Never.
Not even with the revolution?
Never.
That we started out talking about?
Never. The pharaohs, the emperors, never. This has never been
I haven't really looked into that. Like, to me, this might sound cold, but I just think, again, you're going to call me a social Darwinist. I think that that's just what happens. I'm not saying I like it. I'm honestly not saying that I like it. But there are people who provide a great amount of value and they get rewarded for it. I know that there are complications in the systems, like people aren't convicted for crimes. So it's not perfect. And I think that's a problem. But the basic principle is these people are earning so much because they're providing so much.
I wholly disagree.
Okay.
I do not think that the majority of the people who have amassed so much wealth deserve that wealth or worked to deserve that wealth. Some of them have worked really hard.
But using
the word, have done really important things in the world. But I still don't think that that doing good in the world should grant you more freedoms, so to speak, than anyone else. I don't think that makes you better.
Well, you're using these words like deserve and doing good, but I never said that. I was saying they're providing more value. I never said they were doing good. And to me, I also can't like, I'm not trying to make a value judgment on these people. Like, I'm sure that there are nice, insanely rich people and really awful, insanely rich people. It's more like the mathematics of it, that they are providing more.
But we can change those things. It doesn't have to be the case that such few hands, in your words, provide for so many. I don't think that's even sensible.
I don't either. But I don't want to change it through the use of, I guess, like socialist policies. Like I don't like,
How else
you know.
then? I went about a year ago. I went to this talk, and it was this talk about four futures. That was the name of the book. The author, he was giving this talk, and the book was called Four Futures. And the four futures he laid out followed this kind of Cartesian graph. The x-axis was, on one side was abundance, and the other was scarcity. And then the y-axis was egalitarianism, and the other side, hierarchy. And he said that...
Wait.
Yeah.
I think we're about to hit something super fundamental, because you're about to talk about egalitarianism in terms of the outcomes, like how much money people have, so how much access to things they have, such as lobbying the government.
Sure. I mean, like, economics, but also status too. Status too.
Right, but that's tied into the outcomes. But there are people who, this is like a big, huge fundamental issue that like you're defining egalitarianism as that, like how does it end up at the end? But a lot of people, they are thinking about how it is at the source. So how many people are in my way to stop me from getting access to resources?
Right, and that's the wrong way to think about it. I don't think...
I don't necessarily think
yes, it is an opinion, but I say that it's the wrong way to think about it, because all those people who you think are in your way are actually potential allies to to take down the people who are actually your enemies, the bosses, the people who bosses. I'm using that word here,
but
very like the class of people who control the wealth, like, and disproportionately. They're the ones who are keeping everything from you.
But they're not controlling the wealth. They're earning the wealth. Like, it's not like they like sit on like a big thing of money and like decides where it goes. They're like receiving the money, unless it's like through theft and, you know.
Once you've amassed enough wealth in this society, I mean, like, yeah, once you've amassed enough wealth, you can, to a certain degree, control the flow of wealth.
Okay, we're running out of time. I'm sure we could continue on this, but I really wanted you to talk about why socialism has failed because it wasn't given a chance, because that sounded very intriguing for me. If you can kind of say it in a very, in a concise manner.
Yeah, I just finished reading China Miéville's new book, October, which is about, it's a wonderful, dramatic telling of the events in Russia in 1917, with the revolution that happened there, and it's fantastic. If you're interested in the Russian Revolution at all, even if you've read other books about it, I've read other books about it, and this really brought it to life, and it was very exciting and interesting.
But don't people use Russia as an example of why? I don't know that much, but why it doesn't work? Okay.
So I bring it up because it's, what happened in Russia is a tragedy, and it's fascinating. The reason why the Russian Revolution has such a bad reputation now, deservedly so, is because of Stalin. And Stalin was... Can I swear on the show?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he was batshit insane. He was absolutely nuts. And I love how Miéville describes him, because he describes how other people in the party, years before Stalin's rise to power, would describe him as a shadow, as just someone who was always there but always in the background and never said much, never like distinguished himself, but was always there. And it just it's really creepy. Stalin was insane. Stalin ruined everything.
But isn't the whole issue that because someone has so much power, because there's a system that allows so much power, somebody bad can be in that position to use it? You know,
this is a pretty specific political question, and it specifically has to do with how the Bolshevik Party which became the Communist Party, was organized. It's not super interesting, but essentially Stalin was able to do what he did, become this dictator, because he was extremely good at playing these underhanded political games. And during this revolutionary time, where it was quite chaotic, and Lenin, who was not a dictator and was not necessarily a lot of his colleagues, a lot of people thought of himself as the first among equals, so to speak, right? If you catch my drift there, first among equals. He was dying. He was very sick, and this is in the early 20s, I think 23 or 4 or something. And during this time, that's when Stalin kind of amassed all these different responsibilities, so that when Lenin died, Stalin was in place to, he had control of this department and that department, and he became the de facto first among equals.
I don't get that reference.
I mean, it's the idea. I think the idea is that in theory, we are all equals here, but there is clearly one among us who is the leader.
Okay.
But on paper, we're all equals, right? So Stalin deservedly gets a bad reputation, and is the most persistent reason why the Russian Revolution still has a bad reputation. I have to say, though, in 1917, when there was so much propaganda against the Russian Revolution in Europe and in the States and elsewhere, it was not deserved. There was no reason to deride this revolution unless you were afraid of the poor classes rising up and and taking all the wealth that you had amassed and kept from them.
But I'm still not. This might be again one of those central focuses. I'm still not getting over the amassing of power, though. Like, you're trying to help the underclasses, but the problem isn't that. The problem is the concentration of power that allows people such as Stalin to wield it in terrible ways. And then also I wanted to add to, like, what about other places? Because you're just talking about Russia, but what about other places where socialism has a bad rep because of who was in charge?
I mean, that's in large part due to the immense efforts by the CIA to discredit communism in this country and all over. I mean, like, discredit and also violently put down. This country over and over and over
South
again.
America, from what I know, like, I went to Nicaragua, and I think there was some history of like the U.S. government interfering.
Yeah, the conference.
What would you say is the exact, like, reason why? Because I'm trying to get to the reason why you think that socialism has to be given a chance. Like, are you just saying it's the image, the propaganda?
It was hunted from the very beginning. It was hunted from the very beginning. Like, in 1917, Russia, pretty much as soon as the so-called whites, the imperialists, who were the conservatives, the reactionaries, the people who wanted to reinstate a new tsardom, as soon as they realized, oh, this is going to be a much bigger fight than we expected, and as soon as the First World War ended, there was a massive, massive coalition of imperialist countries, including the United States, and pretty much all of the imperialist countries of Europe, who made an alliance with the White Army to take down the Red Army, the communists, and they lost. But that's this kind of weird interchapter between the two world wars that's often not talked about. But yeah, there was a massive global effort to put down the communists because they knew this was going to be a threat to to the capitalist classes of the world.
I hear about the ongoing propaganda from the beginning, but even when the communists did get power, they messed up. So like even if there was propaganda against them, they still won in some places, and in those places.
I mean, I wouldn't argue that they didn't mess up. In some ways, I think it was inevitable. I don't think that people who coordinated. The Russian Revolution is extremely complicated. There were two revolutions that happened in 1917.
Right.
The February one and the October one. And and they were both in their own ways disasters, but for very, very different reasons.
Hold on. What you
don't think I have the
you think it's because of the people? Like what I'm hearing you say, it's because of the people, not necessarily because of the system. Is that what you're saying?
What do you mean?
Like you're saying it's because of the people in charge. Because you said that it was inevitable that they were going to mess up. So I'm confused because I'm like, then why are you even arguing?
Oh, they were just not prepared. They didn't know they didn't know really what it meant to take the government. Like they had thought about it, they had fantasized about it, they had all these ideas, but they didn't fully understand what that meant to take over a government. And immediately, because the Bolsheviks, they were the most hardliners, or some of the most hardliners, they had to make compromises immediately, just by the fact of having the government. It's complicated, and I don't really want to get into it.
But did you get your point across, though? Like, make sure you get your point across since we got to wrap up.
Yeah, we do. What was my point again?
I was asking, you think that socialism... First of all, I was asking about the historical necessity, and we kind of went into that in terms of freedoms. Yeah. But then also, I was asking specifically to talk about why you think it hasn't been given a chance. So just, that's what...
because it was born under fire, it was born hunted, and it was born on the defensive. I mean, like, it has always had to think about its survival and defense of its survival from the very beginning. And so when any living thing lives like that, it has few resources, mental resources, or anything else.
It's not a living thing, though. It's a theory. It's a economic.
Right. So, I mean, I'm speaking metaphorically, but if you are, on a literal sense, if you're focusing so much on, if you're the Soviet Union and you're really freaked out about your biggest rival, the United States, just having used the most horrific and violent weapon ever created by orders of magnitude, and right near your borders, and you know that they hate you, and you know that your country can't withstand another war like this. You have to put your resources into defense. And disproportionately, Russia, the Soviet Union, at the end of World War II was devastated. It was fucking devastated. The United States had the greatest economy in the world, maybe ever, at the end of World War II. And by the way, in part, that was due to some, like, you know, socialist kind of interference from FDR. But in any case, the Soviet Union had to focus on defense immediately, which meant that they couldn't spend as much on other necessities or their other priorities. The same goes with these left governments in Central and South America who immediately had to be on the defensive from reactionaries and conservatives who, in any other case, like, that's just the way that politics goes, right? Like, yeah, you're going to have political enemies. But in the context of the Cold War, that meant that your enemies were backed by the CIA. And it's immeasurable resources.
I still, like, I just started, I started months ago, but I still haven't finished. I started reading the Gulag Archipelago, which I still don't know enough, really. But the big thing that stood out to me was, like, the horrors that people had to endure under the rule of law. Like, what would you say about basically just the horrors of these systems because of, I guess, who is in place? Because you're saying that they never had a chance to sort of stabilize themselves and, like, put a proper plan in place. But what does that seems like? Okay, maybe you're talking about economic things, but the big issue I think that many people point out is the horrors that individuals undergo.
I don't want to apologize for the Soviet Union. I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
I
don't mean to be putting you in that position.
Thing. I'm not a huge, like, Soviet Union apologist. I'm not.
Okay.
I do think that the story of the Russian Revolution is really fascinating and interesting and dramatic and a wonderful story and maybe something to learn from in some way. I don't know. But I'm not going to apologize for the Soviet Union. I don't think that. No, but I can provide. I can provide the context of the United States looming over the Soviet Union the entire time, like a boogeyman. Okay. I'd also like to. Oh shoot! I was going to say something and I forgot what it was.
Go
ahead.
Honestly, I don't really have much to say. I feel like we could have obviously dug deeper, but I feel like we mostly covered what I wanted to cover. I feel like maybe you wanted to make another point against, like, maybe what my subscribers would think of what you're saying, because you were sort of defending yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a point and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, that's what it was. I don't want to apologize for the Soviet Union, but I do think that radical left governments get undue criticism sometimes, or get more criticism than other types of governments. I mean, like, are there not horrors under capitalism? Slavery was an essential part of early capitalism. Capitalism as we know it could not have developed without slavery. And to this day, we still have, it bugs me out every time, like, when I see a little sticker on a shirt or whatever that says "Made in America," and I always think, like, oh, is this Made in America shirt, only $5 because a prisoner made it for, just a few cents? Like, is that why it's so inexpensive?
I do have
Is
a
that
problem with that
better?
personally.
Is that better than like a child in Cambodia making a shirt? Like there is no something that
But that's
left
definitions of like
something
talking
that
about
leftists make.
slavery and prisoners. That has to do with definitions of what property is and also who has their freedoms. So, like you're saying that you don't think capitalism could have developed without slavery, but that seems to be more like definitions and people and how they defined who was a person and who was like a full.
That's on the philosophical sense, but on an
Okay.
economic sense, it's it all has to do with disposable labor, right? Like the idea that um, that people are just labor machines and they are interchangeable.
But isn't that what we are, even if we're not able to sell or labor for wages? Like we'd still be working in order to get anything. So isn't that what we just are? We
I
don't.
think
It's
that's an
mechanical.
extremely I think that's an extremely bleak way of thinking about human
Yeah, it's
life.
very
That we're just
mechanical,
labor machines.
but it's just we're not.
But
But I mean, in terms of
I
the
also
economy.
yeah, so like it's all a matter of priorities, right? Like yes, on a certain level, sure, we are labor machines. On another level though, like we're so much more, and to prioritize the so much more over uh our labor machine selves, like that's the goal. Under capitalism, it's our ability to produce that is valued over everything else, and that's wrong, I
Okay,
think.
I can see.
Um,
I don't really think it's valued. I think it's just how we exchange and trade, and it ends up that way. I don't really think that means that that's how it's people are valued, but I can see what you mean.
well, on a very real sense, like if wealth is a signifier of value, then yeah, we value certain kinds of people far, far, far less, and we value certain other kinds of people far more. And
In terms
often
of
for
economics, I can see
asinine
that.
reasons, in my opinion.
Well, I don't really think it's asinine because it's people providing things that everybody else wants. A lot of it sort of driving humanity forward, like all the little
Yeah, but a lot of
inventions
it
we
is
have.
unnecessary bullshit. I have to get
That's
going, but I
okay.
am going to email you this little game. It is just a point and click game. It's called Post Capitalism. You can find it at Colestia, colestia.itch.io/post capitalism. It's very, very short. It's just a point and click, and it's extremely
Is it
educational.
graphical or is it
Yeah, yeah.
like
It's this little city, and you click on the different parts of the city to um, to see what the thing is. So I'm clicking on one thing. It says natural damage. Emissions and pollutants are rapidly making the planet uninhabitable. And
I
so
think there
you
are
just click
arguments
on the thing over and
that
over until it changes to solar panels. And you click on different things. Turns out, if you change one thing to a quote unquote socialist alternative, then another thing might revert back to capitalism. So you have to understand the relationships, and it's not a
that's
difficult
interesting.
game, but it is extremely educational in a really smart and cute way.
All
Um,
right.
I'm very curious to see how your audience
What they
thinks
think.
of this very obviously biased towards left politics game.
Well, I'm interested too. But everybody has a reason for thinking the way they do, so it's good to try and understand. Um, Thank you for talking to me. I talk
Yeah,
to you all the time.
thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Let me know what you think about this video. It's a bit different from all my others, and you'd have to be really attentive and paying attention to the entire thing. And maybe I didn't quite guide the discussion right, but I hope it was interesting. Just let me know your thoughts, what you think. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good day. Don't forget to subscribe and donate to the channel at justthinkingoutloud.tv/donate. I would very much appreciate it. Also, I might be in a different space soon. Hopefully I can keep the continuity, but I will be in a different physical location. So I have a bunch going on right now. Okay, bye.